Aha! Well, you weren't expecting that one, were you? We're not starting with the Renault Espace F1. We are in fact starting instead my reviews of the 8 vehicles, and come to think of it, it will probably be the 6 cars in the DLC as well, because if you're watching this on the day of release, I'm actually doing my first gameplay video for the Let's Play of the DLC, so stick around for that. Pretty cool to get into that, some picture-in-picture, like proper old-school YouTube gameplay. So of course stick around for that tomorrow, along with of course the members videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays as usual. Instead of starting off with the Espace, because I already did the gameplay, we talked about the Espace a lot in the review, the motor swaps, so let's have a little bit of a break from the Espace. I'll probably talk about that next on Monday, but for now I want to start with a vehicle which, as I already alluded to in my Spec 3 review overall, pleasantly surprised me, and that is of course the Ferrari 296 GT3 car. As I already discussed, I'm not a huge fan of the road version, visually speaking, or in terms of being in the game. I would much rather have a Purosangue, or obviously my dream car, the Ferrari FF, because at least those are different, you know, it's not just another variation of a Ferrari supercar. This one though, it is genuinely useful because so many of the racing focused players in Gran Turismo 7 want more GT stuff, you know, Blancpain, GT2, GT3, this kind of top tier stuff which isn't quite prototype, isn't quite formula, but tends to get a lot of use in time trials, sport mode, online races. It's an obvious thing to want more of, and let's be honest, we haven't exactly had a huge amount of it. I will also say, now that the Espace F1 is in the game, I think my new champion in terms of wanting to come back, the car I'm really going to be rooting for now, is going to be the Panos, which incidentally I think would be perfect in Group 2 against the vehicles that are in there. To get back to the point of the Ferrari, this one of course sits in Group 3. The point level doesn't really matter too much with these cars. Either you're in career mode and you have to adhere to like 800 point events, which of course is exactly what I'm doing here, one of those new events on Yas Marina. It is an 800 point level. Even when you modify the car though, up to like 780, 790 horses, you're still no way near that 800 points. It's not bad at all. You can have the race transmission, you can have higher downforce, lower downforce, you can have so much room to play with, and I gotta admit, it's a pretty OP car in that kind of way, or at least it feels that way to me. Of course, balance of performance can change a whole lot of things, but in terms of just how this immediately feels in standard form on Thursday in that review, this time with way more power up against proper Group 3 cars in this kind of semi-endurance event, it feels great on both fronts. And part of the reason why I like the race car so much more than the road car is, aside from the fact that it's more significant and more useful, it just feels better. It feels more appropriate to the car. The level of power feels perfect for it. 600 horses, even nearly 800 horses, which ironically is still less than the road-going version, but the fact that it's a pure mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, full-on racing experience, to me this feels more Ferrari than the road-going Ferrari actually does, which I guess is appropriate. Ferrari is a motorsport brand first, they always have been, but it's interesting to see that really come through, at least for me, within a digital realm, like a game. So fair play to Polyphony, at least unintentionally, for getting that kind of right. Incidentally, in terms of standard numbers, of course I already touched on a few of them. 599 horses stock, just under 800 with the higher range turbo, 1.2 mil to buy, which in my opinion is perfectly fine. It's a Ferrari, so you kind of expect a bit of a price premium, but even so, there are a few other cars in this kind of realm which are up around, you know, 7 figures anyway, so who really cares. In terms of point level, incidentally, is 743, and in terms of weight, it's 1280 kilos, so not overly heavy, not overly light. In terms of handling, what would I compare it to? Off the top of my head, I think the closest comparison I might make in terms of cars that I also quite like in this game, which I didn't expect to, might be a vehicle which you saw early on here in the race, the old school NSX, the old Super GT car. I never used to like those in the days of GT6 because the steering just felt so weird. I always used to say that it feels to me like the steering pivots from the centre of the car. Sounds like an obvious thing to say being mid-engine, but I don't mean in that kind of way. It feels like the wheels are about 5 feet further back than they actually are. In this game though, the NSX is so much better and so much more enjoyable. This feels kind of like a refined version of that idea, and it also speaks to something, and this is technically road form and race form, but I think the fact that the race form doesn't have the hybrid to worry about kind of highlights this point even more. In my opinion, Ferrari's finest work when it comes to track cars in particular, because my favourites of theirs tend to be the front engine stuff, more touring style like the FF, the 599, the 612, that kind of thing. For racing, for track days, for circuit-based experiences, if you look at them from a side profile, most of their absolute best work tends to be cars which have a very, very short rear overhang and a little bit more overhang on the front. Look through Ferrari's mid-engine selection and look at how often that point comes up. 458 has the exact kind of design that I'm talking about. Everything on the 458 platform shares that kind of shape. The Enzo also has that same kind of shape. Very short rear overhang, much longer nose. It's a consistent thing with Ferrari that any model of Ferrari that has that kind of nose-heavy design with an extremely short tail and a mid-engine, chances are it's going to be a really, really good track car. car. And it's an easy rule of thumb, you look at a Ferrari, to kind of already know without driving it yet, roughly what it's going to be like. The reason why this one still surprised me, even having said that, is because I thought it just might suffer from that kind of twitchiness, which some other Ferraris have had in the past in the racing world, and also stuff like the NSX, because to me, mid-engine race cars are just, by definition, a little bit more unpredictable, and that can be a good thing, but it can also work against them sometimes. In the case of this car though, and I believe it is partially probably because of the change in physics as well, it's surprisingly forgiving. I had to do barely anything to it in terms of tuning, maybe a slight adjustment to downforce or whatever, but really nothing much. It's kind of like the Espace, I just jumped into it and just took it as it is. This car was the same. Driving it in 600 horsepower standard form, driving it here in turbo form with way more power, it still has fantastic minimal fuel use around the entire event without changing, even for tyres. And obviously it's on hard tyres, so you would expect them to last a bit longer, but even so, I think that's pretty strong indeed. I could see it being perhaps a little bit of an OP choice, maybe even a lot of an OP choice. That is where I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you've already used this car a bunch online, maybe a bunch in sport mode, particularly when balance of performance comes in, have you noticed this to be a good car, about average, or maybe under par? I would have a hard time seeing this being a bad car, even with a balance of performance, but has this car ended up being OP so far with balance of performance, or even without, just racing online in Group 3 stuff, or do you find it to be maybe just right there with the rest of the pack, which technically is how it should be, but we all know that isn't really how it pans out with Group 3, or really any group for that matter. A very, very pleasant surprise for me. Coming from a non-Ferrari superfan, I could actually see this being one of my go-to Group 3s moving forward, because it's just such a pleasant car to work with. It has great straight line performance, great cornering, minimal fuel use. I'm sure it's about average with the other cars in terms of that kind of efficiency, but it just feels kind of better than I expected it to be on fuel and tyres. So yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. Plus, obviously being the new kid on the block, it's got the wow factor, it's the new thing. So of course after that wears off, it will be interesting to see where does it fall then, but at least for now, I really like the car. So of course, stick around tomorrow for that first episode of the Let's Play of the Power Pack DLC, and of course on Monday and thereafter for more reviews. But for now, thanks for watching.